Okay, so Mr. Marshall, welcome here. We have some questions. The first of all is why do schools, at least in Italy, ignore the importance of geography and leave it in the shadows of other subjects? What is the case about England, maybe?
Geography traditionally in many countries has been regarded as a boring subject. And my own experience as a child was they taught me about soil samples and different types of rock. And yeah, maybe I need to know something about this, but I need to know more of a framework of the world I live in about mountains and rivers and things that happened in history because of this geography, and how geography actually helps determine what will happen in the world. And I think if you teach it like that, I think it comes alive. I hope more recently people are beginning to bring into geography things like demographics. And so you explain, look, there is this many people here, and if they move to this place here, this changes things. And then it becomes alive, and you have this framework to understand the world.
Does the lack of geographical knowledge necessarily imply a lack of interest in traveling?
No, you can be interested in traveling and not be necessarily interested in geography. But I am certain those that aren't, if it was explained to them properly, it would make the place they visit come alive even more. And so I wish at a popular culture level, when you do a guide and you read the guide to the place you're going, you know, it would be interesting to say about you will notice in the north of the land the mountains are higher and the people's skins are lighter, and here, because they were cut off by this river, the accent is things like this, but how to connect what is ancient, which is topography, with how it is now, and then it comes alive for people, I think.
To what extent is the media producing a distorted image of certain places which goes beyond their true nature, like in Middle East countries?
I don't think the media deliberately distorts things. I think sometimes because of a lack of time or a lack of knowledge, and the pressure to condense difficult things into short spaces, television news, for example, it is oversimplified, and I may be guilty of this as well, and so you don't get a real picture. Someone could say one line, whereas in fact it needs 5 or 6, and that's why you have to be so careful, especially in broadcast journalism, when you're writing. You really need to make sure that this sentence is real and is not actually misleading. It's very, very difficult to do, but there's some good people who do it.
Is the recent opening up from Kim Jong-un to South Korea a very positive sign, or rather just something to show off?
It's a positive sign in that there is the possibility that it will lead to something positive. Because if there wasn't such an opening, then that's negative, because when you're not talking, there is an added danger of conflict. When you are talking, you're on the right road. So I have no idea if it goes to success, but it's certainly positive that they're opening. And after the passage of time, 70 years, when new generations come and they look at the world and think the economy is not working, I think there is always a statute of limitations on a dictatorship, and the clever dictators know that, and they know when it's running out. Maybe that's what Kim is thinking.
I mean, it's a commonplace, but we do live in an age where moving around has never been this easy and convenient and cheap. Do you think this tendency will reach a saturated level where traveling loses its pure and spontaneous nature and it becomes a monotonous activity? And do you think this can have positive effects too?
I think we may be at saturation point already, although maybe people would have said that in the 70s. There are more people now, and between now 7 billion and 2055, when it goes to, some people even say 11 billion. So that's a lot more traveling. And it does spoil them. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I go somewhere, I am part of this problem. I know that. I haven't, yeah, we all are. And I have no time for people to say, I'm not a tourist, I'm a traveler. No, you're a tourist, okay? Get over yourself. And you already see measures are being put into place. Sometimes somewhere is fenced off, you can no longer walk on it because there's just too many people walking on it. And I understand that has to happen. You say it's never been an easier time to travel, and you're absolutely right. We can be in 12 hours what would be a 6-month sea voyage. Amazing, miracle. But there are borders going up. I believe that the world is becoming a little bit more divided than it has been in the past couple of decades, and that might mean restrictions on visas, difficulty actually physically crossing through a border if there are now big border checks. So there's a slight reverse, and the example, of course, in Europe is the Schengen Agreement, where you could drive from the southern Italy up to Denmark, not a single border check. Because of the recent pressures, that's beginning to change.
Should the fact that many borders are artificial tell us many things about the country which determined them in a given historical moment? And so has choosing frontiers from scratch always been the result of an emergency situations?
No, Africa is probably the best example. This wasn't from an emergency situation. This was practical colonialism. I'm not defending it. For example, there are countries in Africa whose borders were drawn simply because the French had got that far and the British had got that far, and they didn't really want to meet and clash. So London and Paris would say, okay, we'll stop here. Completely artificial. So that's not an emergency. And then, of course, we know after this First World War, the French and the British agreed these lines. Again, going back to geography, I think it's so important when you're teaching current affairs, international politics. You don't just say Nigeria. You then look inside Nigeria and you learn that pretty much the British drew these lines and then told about 15 different nations, not nation state, but nations or peoples, different peoples. You are all one people now. You're all Nigerians. I mean, this is a recipe for difficulty for decades, which is what has happened. Nigeria is trying to make a nation state and a unified people with differences. But, some people say, oh, the Africans, they all just hate each other. Look what we did in Europe for 400 years. And we expect everybody to suddenly come to an agreement in 70 years? No.
So many peoples living in a certain geographical area, many populations, don't have a country yet. Even though they are fighting to get it, like Kurds, Palestinians, or like Caucasian populations from Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Nagorno-Karabakh, even the Catalans. So is it possible to establish when these are spontaneous claim to independence from people who were always silenced, or when instead is it the desire for fear of unity?
When there is a nation that doesn't have a state, Kurds, a great example, it is usually based on several definitions: language, culture, religion, and territory. Going back since everybody's memory, the Kurdish Stan area is very clearly defined. You can see the contours of it, and it is based on geography. So there isn't a massive difference. There's difference in the detail, but the raison d'être, the rationale is the same. If you are part of the Catalan people that wants independence, and obviously it's split, it's the same reason as Scottish people want it, or Abkhazia. It is a belief that you are a nation with your own culture, language, possibly religion in some respects, in a defined geographic area, and you can define Catalonia clearly. There's mountains on one side, hills on another, and the sea on another. So that is exactly the same, pretty much for all the nations that want to become states. It's pretty much the same. Then you get into the detail. Now, Catalonia the Catalonians who want independence don't only want independence, some of them, because they believe in the nation governing itself. The detail is that they're also richer. They're better off. Some of them don't want to give their taxes to Madrid. So that's where it starts to differ in that sort of detail. But no, overall, the philosophy is the same everywhere.
Do you travel to write or write to travel?
Do I write to travel? Well, maybe neither. Look, I traveled for 25 years, almost non-stop. And that was for my job. I didn't do either. I didn't travel to write or write to travel. I loved my job as a reporter, and it took me around the world, and I never even thought about it. Now, probably travel to write. I don't travel as much now, but when I do, I'm very conscious of taking in things, noticing things to help me better understand wherever I am in case I want to write about it. I mean, there's lots of small little details. Coming up the motorway a couple of days ago, noticing how many German cars, with the D plate are going, and just little things about how many Germans must come down here for holiday. I mean, why wouldn't you? So it's that sort of small thing, but dozens and dozens of them that give you a feel. So now when I travel, I'm always looking because I think I might write something later.
What is the funniest book you've ever read?
Oh, wow, funniest. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure for us, and welcome to Mantova.